Kevin Haggerty here, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with J. Davidson Frame, the author of Framing Decisions, Decision-Making that Accounts for Irrationality, People, and Constraints. And Dr. Frame, or if may I call you David? You go by David, right?
Sure, call me David.
Okay, so David, just by way of introduction, could you tell us who you are and where you've been, and what qualifies you to write a book about decision making?
Okay, well, right now I'm a professor at the University of Management and Technology in Arlington, Virginia, where we have substantial online programs in the areas of decision sciences, project management, technology management, and general business management. My background in the decision science area extends back to graduate school, where I did my doctoral work in economics, focusing on quantitative methods, which overlap heavily. Those types of orientations, quantitative methods and economics, overlaps very heavily with much of what goes on in the decision science arena. For 19 years, I taught at George Washington University's Department of Management Science, and that's the department that deals with decision-making issues at GW. And then since 1998, I've been teaching decision science, technology management, project management at the University of Management and Technology.
Okay, so you have a quite a long history then, several decades of involvement in decision science and quantitative techniques and so forth. When you talk about traditional decision making, when you walk down the aisles in the library, row upon row of books, does the world need another book on decision making?
I think, I guess my answer would be yes, otherwise I wouldn't have dedicated a couple of years to writing this book. And let me explain my answer, because I agree with you. There's an awful lot of material out there on decision sciences and decision making. Okay, I think what distinguishes my book and the approach I've taken is that traditional fare tends to focus on what I call the mechanics of decision making. Okay, traditional fare focuses on tools and techniques. Okay, it assumes that the decision making effort that you take can be articulated, so you can articulate the problem you're working on so that it's clearly defined, that the problems that you work on have clear-cut answers, that there are answers to the problems you face, and that these answers, when you look at these answers, you can find an answer that gives you an optimal solution to the problem you face. So you can do decision making and achieve optimality. So that's what much of the traditional fare focuses on. Okay, well, there are various things that have bothered me about this as I've been teaching traditional decision making, and they've been bothering me for a long time. And I guess I've reached a peak with the economic disaster we faced back in 2008, where the world economy faced the biggest single crisis it's faced since the time of the Great Depression. And as I was reflecting on how could our society, where we have all these very smart people, we have Nobel Prize winners consulting with companies, showing them optimal ways of managing their affairs. We have some of the smartest people, the best educated people in history and smartest people on earth, giving guidance to the government on how to manage the economy. We're so successful, we thought, in managing the economy that we were even declaring just a few years ago that we no longer have to worry about business cycles. Depressions were a thing of the past. Yes, we need to suffer some minor course correction with small recessions, but depressions and those kind of huge dislocations that we face, they're all a thing of the past. And I'm looking and I'm saying, well, what happened? Okay, how did we all believe this story? Okay, that we told ourselves and that thought to be true. How could we believe this? And well, what's going on? And my conclusion was that to a large extent, the crisis that we've been facing, and this extends way before 2008. Okay, if you actually take a look back, 20, 30 years we've gone back, where what we're really facing here to a large extent, in my view, is a crisis of decision making. Because, why do I say that? Because we have an awful lot of very smart people using very advanced information technology and computer modeling and operations research techniques. Okay, we have a lot of smart people using a lot of powerful techniques. Okay, and despite all of that, we weren't able to get it right. So in my book, what I want to do is to take a look at the gaps that exist in the the gaps that I perceive to exist in the decision-making textbooks and courses. Okay, and these gaps focus on, for example, the total absence of any discussion of the role of people. Okay, and what I call the social space that all decisions occur in. Okay, every decision that's made is made by humans and occurs in a social space, and what you have in a social space is you have multiple players. Okay, anytime a decision is made of any consequence, not trivial decisions on what cereal to eat in the morning, but decisions of consequence. Okay, when you have a decision of consequence, it has impacts on people. Okay, multiple players go into, work together to try and come up with a solution to identify what's a decision we should pursue. These players very often don't agree with each other. It's almost impossible to have 100% consensus as to what should be done. So we have an environment of where you have multiple players, okay, who have multiple perspectives and who very often disagree, sometimes disagree substantially with each other. And none of this is treated in your classic decision-making fair. It's more focused on quantifying problems and defining problems in that sense. There are other things too. The traditional fair doesn't deal with psychological issues. It doesn't deal with motivational issues. Okay, it doesn't take into account something I think is very, very obvious, and that is that when we are making decisions, our decisions are based on information we receive, very often information that's published, okay, or information that comes to us by people on the outside we're working with, or information we receive from our own employees, and very often this information is just wrong. Sometimes it's wrong because the people we're getting the information from are liars. They're lying. Okay, I went through, at home I have in my office, I have stacks and stacks of books on decision making that I use as resources in preparing my own book, and I saw nothing in any of these books on the reality of lying. Okay, and how you deal with people who are giving you incorrect information. You also, when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with varying degrees of competence. There are a lot of people out there who are highly competent, but there are a lot more people out there who are not very competent at all. So what I try and deal with in my book, and in a sense it's captured in my subtitle, what I try to deal with is irrationality, okay, with people, and then the constraints that we face when we try to make decisions. Every time you make a decision, you're in handcuffs, okay, and part of the challenge is to figure out where's the key that I can unlock my handcuff. Okay, so that's basically, I think, to the extent I can address those issues, and my book really is making a new contribution to the decision-making literature.
Well, now you talk about your long history in decision science and your knowledge of quantitative tools and techniques, but in your book you talk about how decision making really needs to go beyond the logical. What about, what isn't rationality good? Don't we want to make decisions based on rationality? Are you concerned with limitations of rationality?
Well, this issue of rationality is a major theme of the book, and what I'll do is, in future discussions that we have, we can go into that, into more detail of that particular point. But I do, to your point, when I say that we've got to cope with irrationality or non-rationality, the point I'm trying to make there is that the standard literature is just obsessed. Okay, it's obsessed with decision-making so that everything is consistent and rational and logical and so on, and then I look around at the world around me and I look at the decisions that I see being made on a daily basis, and I also looked at, as soon as you have two or more people making a decision, it's not clear what's rational at all. Okay, I mean, what's rational, if a decision works in favor of person A, then person A will see it as rational. But if that same decision works against person B, then person B will see it as irrational. So basically, I think the focus on rationality is it's leading us astray. Okay, we're not really looking at certain key issues. Irrationality and non-rationality are key components that we have to of the decision process that we have to learn to deal with. But to say that our key drive in making decision making is to try to structure problems so that we can have rational decisions, again, I don't get that.
Okay, David, thank you for sharing your insights on decision science, and we'll be interested to hear more about what the book includes.
Thank you.